Okay. All right. So good evening. And this is a meeting of the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee. So in accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel. The recording of this meeting will be available on the Lunenburg Public Access YouTube channel within 24 hours. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, this meeting, public meeting is being conducted remotely. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. Public participation is encouraged and public comments may be welcome during committee member discussions at the discretion of the chair. So we start all of our meetings with the public comment, and then as noted, we have the school committee members here with us today. And so we will very quickly be run into that and then be mindful of your time. My intent here is to make sure that we wrap up the discussion with the members of the school committee no later than 6:45. Certainly, I hope that it will be a quicker conversation than that, so that way you guys can move on with your evening. So do we have any public comments tonight from the public? All right. I'm looking, I don't see any. Okay. And do we have any public comments from our APDC representative? Mr. Scullen-Breen.
No, we do not. We have no comments. And I'm glad to be an official representative for the APDC. They asked me to do that, and I'm pleased to be here on an official capacity.
Wonderful. And do we have any public comments tonight from any of our committee members? Okay, seeing none. All right, so at our last meeting, what we did was, and I'm going to go ahead and share this on the screen once I open it up and get out of my personal email. So at our last meeting, we discussed some questions that we had for the town manager, and then we also had some questions for the school committee. So just so that the school committee members are aware, so what we're trying to do with our charge, so we, as you may be aware, so that our scope has broadened a little bit from the TCP Municipal Building Design Committee to the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee. So our focus really is looking at TC Passios, Town Hall, and Ritter Building to identify how we can consolidate town office functions, continue to provide school the services, which we refer to most of the services at TCP as school uses or school services, and then also for those community services as well. So one of the things that we're trying to do is decrease the square footage that's required. And so, you know, at the very kind of on one end of this, we're still trudging through and looking through a lot of the details that go into what each building needs. But we want to try to tackle some of the programming questions that come up, so that way when we get to that point in the conversation, you know, it's already something that's been vetted. You know, our goal really here is to work well with the boards that appoint the members to this committee, and making sure that we have a solution that everyone's on board with, so that way when we go to town meeting, that it's a very well vetted solution that everyone can support and endorse, and that we kind of work through all the challenges and questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen share, the response that we received. And I'm not sure if Mr. Leighton, Brian, if you want to present this, I'll go ahead and share it. But if you want to present this, that'd be helpful. And then that can kind of trigger the conversation with the school committee and members of our board. So let me go ahead and screen share here. All right. So I've been using Teams so much that it's like, you forget, right, from one system to the next sometimes. All right, are you looking at my whole screen? Probably. So let me stop sharing and share the one thing you need to see. Okay, here we go. All right, and this should just be the response that we received. So Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
So Mr. Leighton, on behalf of the Municipal Building Design Committee, requested a contingency plan for programs current for programs currently located at TCP, if there were no space available for these programs with a renovation of TCP, or if the building were replaced with a new building. I worked with my team to consider alternative spaces for these programs, extended day, before and after school program. The program would have to be relocated back to the cafeterias in Turkey Hill Elementary School and Primary School. The program was consolidated to TCP 3 years ago due to safety and operational concerns. If returned to the two school cafeterias, the enrollment at each location will be significantly reduced. Activities of the program will be significantly limited. The current long-term program staff has expressed considerable reluctance to remain with the program if this relocation occurs. Staffing for this program has been a significant challenge in recent years. Lack of staffing may result in program elimination. Regarding the Early Learning Center, currently we do not have the space to house this school day play school program in one of our schools. This program would be eliminated. The Early Learning Center is not licensed pre-K program. If the advocacy for universal pre-K is renewed at the federal or state level and legislation requiring universal pre-K is passed, this program would then also be eliminated. Community School Linked Services Program. This program is grant funded. We would look to maintain this program and would hope to utilize the space in the Lunenburg Public Library for parent education sessions. However, the grant has requirements. If we cannot meet the requirements in a new space, we may lose the grant funding and therefore lose the program. In regards to the ACE program, we have no appropriate space to house this program in our schools. Students will have to be enrolled in a similar program in another community.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I know that, so I did have just want to make everyone aware, I did have a follow-up conversation briefly with the superintendent, just to kind of just give her some of that professional courtesy to advise kind of what the kind of general range of discussion today was going to be. And then that way, again, to advise that, we were going to discuss this. So the first thing, I think, if I tend not to start on these conversations, so I will turn it to the members of the committee first. If there's any questions, Christina. And I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing. I think that everyone probably has some good notes here, so I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing. I did distribute this as well. So Christina. Oh, we can't hear you, but you're not on mute.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I went through this, but I kind of had a question for each one. So sorry if this is long, but I just wanted some clarification, even if it's not exact, just a ballpark. So currently, how many kids are enrolled in extended day or like early day program? And what would it be reduced to?
Right now, the cap is set at 75 due to the staffing challenges that we've had this year. I can't guarantee what number I'm looking to reduce the enrollment to if we have to move back to the cafeterias in each of the school buildings. But you're probably talking nothing in excess of about 30.
For each or combined?
For each location. And that really will depend upon whether or not I can staff to that degree in both locations.
So you said that they'd be in the cafeteria. Are the gymnasiums of the school not an option? Just to try and like think about it. No, okay.
They aren't because our youth basketball league uses those the gymnasiums for practice.
Okay. And just to clarify, the early learning, that's the preschool that runs out of TCP, not the one that's run out of the town. So it's like the additional one. If you don't get in the main one, that's the other one.
So it is another one, but it's not an automatic default if you don't get into the preschool program that's located at the primary school.
Okay.
That's a totally separate program, separate registration.
Okay. Yeah, so I just was clarifying. And then the ACE program, so I'm assuming that's town funded for the people that use it. What other towns have that? And do the other towns have better programs, or do towns send their students, I guess, here to our program, I guess having a better understanding of what else is available to them if it went away, or what would be kind of reason for us to hold on to it. Because I know I came from Arlington and we have lab where it was Lexington, Arlington, Belmont, and I believe Burlington. So it was kind of like a conglomerate, and just kind of seeing if it's similar where other towns work together and what would be the best option for them.
So I can't say for sure which towns in our general area do have the 18 to 22-year-old program. I would think that most schools do. We belong to the Keystone Collaborative, but it's not as if all of the member districts send their 18 to 22-year-olds to the collaborative. The purpose of these programs for the 18 to 22-year-olds is life skills, job skills. So having them located in the community in which they live and will have to navigate as adults is one of the driving factors to these programs. Our kids do different jobs as some examples. Now with the co-location of the food bank at TCP, our ACE students are working with folks from the food pantry to prep baskets to go out. They deliver school mail, if you will, in between school buildings, up to the central office, and even up to town hall, where it's then distributed off to other departments. So those are two examples of how they have some work experience in the community, which is why, it's not ideal for us to have to close the program and find another location for them. Because while they would be getting job skills, et cetera, it's not in the community in which they live.
Thank you.
Okay. Did we have any other questions? Let's see, going down the line here. Yes, Mr. Beardmore.
This is going to be more of a comment than a question, but take it as it's intended, which is really, I think this needs more discussion. So this is my position, but I think my position will hopefully beget more discussion. In my opinion, TC Passios is not a long-term option for any of this. So at some point, it might be 2 years, it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years from now, we've got to take more or less all of the school functions that are in TCP and find another home for them. That's just reality based on the shared experiences that we've had over the last couple of years, right? We're not going to do this $30 or $40 million renovation to TC Passios that's going to solve all of our problems. There's going to have to be a lot of compromise, and things are going to get moved in some cases to people's second or third list of where they would prefer to have things. And so a response that says this program will be in jeopardy, 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 in my view, is a very short and fatalistic view of things. And number one, doesn't give us enough information, but number two, doesn't really put us on a path to figuring out, okay, what are the feasible alternatives? And let me just give you some context. My daughter, both of my kids participated in school link services. My daughter started in the basement of the old primary school. It then moved to the United Parish building. When my son got in, and I think it was at the library for a very short period of time. When my son got into it, it was at the Mossman building. It was off hours when, at that point, the teen center was running. It was before Boys and Girls Club or YMCA or whatever was in there. And so my point is that I think for some of these programs, there may be alternatives if we know specifically what are the restrictions, if they're grant funding or whatever, that we can then look within those parameters and say, okay, what are the alternatives? What could work? And what makes sense when we go and build a replacement for Turkey Hill or a renovation for Turkey Hill, that we need to go beyond the bounds of an MSB,
Please.
not the protection of cruelty to
MSBA.
animals, MSBA, not the animals one, the kids one. The MSBA reimbursement program, and say, no, we're going to build onto this to add space for ACE or whatever else is not part of the reimbursement program because we need it, right? In my mind, this requires bigger, longer term thinking to get us to figure out, okay, what is that North Star that we're going to point to as we're going to, maybe step one is we're just going to renovate town hall or whatever. But I think we need to be able to build a framework to draw a picture that this could fit here, this could do this. No, we absolutely need to build this in a Turkey Hill footprint. Because, yeah, I mean, look, TC Passios will probably be running next year, right? Like but it might not be the year after or the year after that. And therefore, just saying, oh, the program's in jeopardy. Yeah, I knew that before we asked the question, that the program was in jeopardy. What I really want to know is, what are our paths to alternatives? So I guess that's my question.
Yep. So the responses that you got really were a result of thinking about just being able to work within the school buildings, right? So if there are other, in the bigger picture of things, as you're thinking about use of other buildings, then certainly there's a possibility that we could reconsider relocating some of our programs into a different municipal building. But when we took a look at it, we were looking at, okay, what's our capability if we have to house these programs within our school buildings? So we had some serious limitations. I mean, the challenge for me is it really is very context specific. Yep. 2-3 years from now, if I don't need a 6th kindergarten and I could free up a classroom at the primary school, then potentially I could have the early learning center classroom located at the primary school. Or I could potentially have our community school link services located in that building. One of the limiting factors for our community school links program is that they have to have a dedicated phone line. It cannot be a shared line. I can't set them up in my office and they can use my phone extension. They have to have a dedicated phone line. Right now, where we're located at TCP, they've got, a room with toys that are set up for, toddlers, the play kitchen, the puppet theater, so on and so forth. The grant funds programs to come in to foster STEM learning and literacy, as well as parent education programs. So when those types of activities are going on, parents might be in one location while the kids are in a different location, having a play group, or having, one of those outside vendors that come in to do the education components. So yes, I know the history of the program. I know it's been located in a variety of places. We just, I think, would need to be mindful of the fact that we're going to need space that can be occupied by children at the same time that we've got space being occupied by adults for a different session, if you will. And again, the dedicated phone line is one of the components that's required in the grant. Now, a couple of years ago,
Can I just ask you a question on that, Dr. Burnham?
Sure.
Can that be achieved with like a voice over internet, like a VoIP type system?
I'd have to check. I'd have to check.
I'm imagining like a phone on a wall or something, like it's 2022, you know, like a long cord or something.
I don't know what to say. I don't make the requirements for the grants.
Yeah.
I know that there are possibly lots of workarounds. Whether or not it actually meets and satisfies the grant, you know, we'll have to see. A couple of years ago, year to year, there was the conversation from the state level that they weren't sure that they would be able to continue to fund this grant. We haven't heard those comments the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But there is always the possibility with this program that this is something that will not, the funding won't be available. And at some point we may not be able to run the program because we no longer have the funding. Now, again, things have changed over the years, requirements have changed over the years. So some of the locations that you talked about, Mr. Beardmore, I don't even know if they would still be satisfactory locations.
Well,
with the new
I guess that's what
requirements.
I'm getting to though, Dr. Burnham, and that's my frustration here is that, you know, we are potentially going down a path where we run into conflict, right? Where the town says, there's just no way that we can do this. We can't support it. And we need to move on with a building plan. And you're not going to be part of the TC Pasio's building plan. And then you're up the river without a paddle, right? And that's not what we want to do because we're as much
Right.
the school as we are the town. As you know, I'm as much the school as I am the town. That's how I think of my role. I'm appointed by a school committee member. The point that I'm trying to make here is that we need to avoid that, right? We need to kind of figure out, all right, well, we need to come up with alternatives, and then we need to put in the hours to figure out, okay, what are the parameters around each of these programs? And then what are the feasible alternatives? Can we put ACE in space in the village? You know, the rent is relatively inexpensive in the village and there's always vacancy. You know, like, I mean, those are the kinds of, and I don't know that that's even feasible, but I don't know that it wouldn't be feasible today either, right? It's right in the community. It's right in, you know, it's right in downtown. But those are things that in my mind, you know, telling me that the program is in jeopardy, I know that, right? But so is TC Pasio's. That building is, God willing, not going to be standing in its current existence in 10 years.
Right.
And so we need to figure out what else we're going to do.
Right. So I sort of feel like it's a little premature for me to be reaching out to superintendents from Leominster or Fitchburg. And I would go that way before I would go Air Shirley, because those communities have much more opportunity for work experience, that having some additional students as part of those programs would not be as significant a burden as some of the more rural communities where, you know, they're already tapping their opportunities for work experiences for the kids. But that's one of the things that I spoke about when I presented this to the school committee. We could absolutely be talking about the possibility of a co-op type arrangement where we're paying some of the staff, but our kids are located, physically located in Leominster or in Fitchburg. You know, that's a possibility. I think honestly, that's more cost effective than us paying rent for another facility. You know,
I want to offer so just some, I want to be mindful of the time, but I want to also, if you don't mind, Dr. Burnham, just want to just reach to Mr. Allison if he wants to provide any comments before I provide mine.
Put me on the spot, thanks. So I'd be surprised if anybody here didn't expect these comments or really appreciates them much, but there's a large number of people in town that don't have kids, that kids have passed through schools, that have lived here all their lives, and they're getting sick of the transient parents that come here because we've got such great school systems. I guess my question is, I think all four of these programs, they kind of seem like tax-paid daycare to me a little bit. And if you'd focus more on the K through 12 education in town of Lunenburg, then you might not need to have 18 to 22-year-olds coming back to learn life skills and job skills. Quite honestly, and quite frankly.
So let me just offer a point of information. Those children are entitled to remain in education through their 22nd year. So.
Entitlement is another big issue that is hurting towns and stuff in general, this country, whatever. But and I guess I have to ask, what happened to the paddle that you had a year ago that you said when Dr. Burnham came to this group and said that, yeah, no problem, we can relocate all the things going on in TC Pasture. What's changed?
I don't recall saying that.
You don't?
No.
Any of the other members want to back me up here? Because we did have her at our meeting and she did say that she could relocate all those programs.
I don't recall that either, Mr. Allison, but I don't want that to be a hang up today, but I personally don't recall that.
Okay.
I think it was similar to what we saw in the letter, that it was not ideal, that they were going to have to
Right.
lower the populations. And this is kind of what we expected, very similar to what we heard. This letter was the same results that we had heard in
Right.
the prior meeting, that there were
Right.
sizes were going to be reduced and it's not ideal. So I don't think this letter was much of a surprise to the original committee members that this was not ideal. But even when Dave Passios was on the committee too, he had asked, like, what if we need more space? And it was like, okay, these programs, the school programs would be the first to go back to the schools and we would have more space for expanding town offices.
Before I opine, Christina.
So I just have like a comment to Matt Allison, and I don't want to start a fight. I was very upfront when I joined this committee. I have two very young kids. I have a 2.5-year-old, almost 3-year-old, and I have an 18-month-old daughter. Aside from the linked services at TCP, there is zero in this town for young children and young families. Last year with COVID, I was a stay-at-home mom because I couldn't get services, preschool, for my kids. And that was the one program that was running in this town. They have nothing, absolutely nothing. I even posted on Facebook 2 weeks ago asking if there's any programs to get my 3-year-old in. Nobody responded. This town does very, very little for young children until they hit school age. So for me, like, I understand people without kids, it's hard to hear, but taking away the one program that is there is even worse. But to that point, the program meets 2 days a week for about an hour and a half. And during COVID, it was outside. So could the program be utilized in a different space, maybe like some agreement with the Boys and Girls Club where they don't use it during the day and they have kids, like maybe one room set up for kids' toys? Or is it something that has to be done on school property? And to that later point about not moving them out of town, I have a family member who is on services and was part of those services, and they continue services in Fitchburg at the Arc, and then there's Gamma and Gardner. So I know these kids do get shipped out of town later once they graduate. So maybe saying, you know, when if push comes to shove, having the relationship with Fitchburg or Leominster isn't the end of the world because they're used to kind of going into those areas, but also seeing what they have and is it comfortable or is it something that is totally disruptive to them? And is this something the town needs to look at funding and seeing what we can do better to help them? But that was it.
Thank you, Christina. Brian?
Thank you. My position is very similar to how Mr. Beardmore had spoke about his position. I do have concerns about the future of TCP, that it's either not going to be there, or if it's renovated, the new renovated space is not going to be ideal for students, where it's a high cost of space to be in a newly renovated space for classrooms. I did wonder too about just thinking outside the box, like Mr. Beardmore had said, like, could Ritter be a possible location or Town Hall be a possible location? What would need to be done to those buildings for that to work? I know you had spoke earlier when you met with us about the director of the ACE program needing to be in the building with them. So I don't know if Ritter or Town Hall would potentially make sense, or just possible scenarios that could work for that. Just really just thinking of alternatives. I like what Mr. Beardmore said of just kind of getting creative. What other possibilities could work? Could a Turkey Hill renovation or remodel also fit some of these programs?
Yeah, and I'll offer some comments as well. Thank you for that, Brian. So, I think that the ideal situation for us to have is one that we've already presented and one that will never pass, which is to tear down the building and to put a new building there that will last us for the next 150 years. That's, to me, is the solution. But our fellow residents are never going to approve a $40 million project. We're never going to get the support because of the location as well, and that's not going to happen. So, I think that we have to navigate in this non-ideal situation to get to a solution. And really, it's about what is practical and what can pass. And the two may not always be one and the same. But that's what we have to focus on. One thing that I want to ask the school committee members to consider in this, and the superintendent, is a couple of things, and you've heard this from, I think, all the members who've spoken tonight, that whatever solution we come up with for the future of TCP, of how we're going to consolidate town offices, how we're going to put all these things in a home for decades to come, whatever the temporary solution is, long-term solution, it cannot be a net loss to the community. So, parents such as Christina, who depend on or who will depend on the extended day program, who depend upon the early learning center, who depend upon community link services, so long as that's available, those services must continue, and they must continue without any new caps in order for all of this to pass. And so I think that what we're looking for from the school committee is the reality that there will be a time where TCP will likely not be in use. Even if we remodel the building and repurpose it, the most cost-effective way to do that is to kick everybody out. And so there's going to be a need to rehome extended day for a period of time. Now, a long-term solution, in my opinion, is when there's a Turkey Hill Elementary School build, that we build on a resource room with that. As Mr. Beardmore suggested, that there's an add-on to that building that gives the extended day a permanent home, in addition to the use of the cafeteria or whatever nearby room could be converted for that use. That may be the long-term solution, but that's probably 10 years. We're probably 10 years away from that. So we need to have a plan for between now and then, and we're not realistically going to get people to vote for the plan if parents believe that they're no longer going to have a place for their children to go before and after school if they really depend on that service. So that's one challenge that I think we're really looking for the school committee to be a partner on. That's one request here. Another one is the future use of the Turkey Hill, of TCP in general. That a lot of conversations have been had lately, or statements have been said over the past several years, that many people don't see that as a good location for a future town hall use. They want it to be preserved for future school use. Even at the town hall meeting or annual town meeting that we just had, when we were talking about 30 School Street, many people were, well, we could use TCP to be a park and preserve it for a future school. And those conversations were even said then. It would be helpful for the school committee to take a position on this. So that way we can be guided in how we move forward. Do you, as members of the school committee, see the TCP as a future school location? Should we be trying to preserve that to be a future school? I believe this conversation has already been had, but I think that it would be helpful to have it again and to get a current kind of input from the school committee on what you see this parcel being best used for. Does it make sense for us to kind of stop talking about how to convert this into municipal use and start talking about preserving for future school use, and what is the best way to preserve the land for future school use. So that's, so again, one thing is we cannot see a net loss in any of these after school programs. We're looking for the school committee to kind of have that conversation on TCP. What is your ideal purposeful use of that? And the third area here is for there to be somewhat of a records review. So in the plan that we had for the remodel, almost 12,500 square feet were committed for school-related functions. And at the cost of, we're seeing construction costs between $400 and $500. So I'm going to shoot it down the middle and say $450. That's about $5.6 million. And I can say, ain't happening. That is not, it just ain't going to happen. We are not going to build for $6 million purposes that many members of the community. The first question is, we have hundreds of thousands of square footage in the school. Why won't that work? And I think that we have to overcome some of those concerns. And so really, anything we can do to decrease this footage, including records. So kind of looking through the records and figuring out, as the town is doing, what can be digitized, what actually needs to be held. Is there a cost that the town can incur that will, similar to the town side, we just approved $62,500 to go through and kind of purge our records and identify how to digitize what we have. There may be a need to do this on the school side, because on the town side, it's going to save us about 4,000 square feet. So, 4,000 square feet. And again, at the costs that we're looking at, that's a lot of money. So if the school can do the same to decrease your needed square footage for records, that would also be helpful. So records, future use of TCP, and whatever temporary plan for extended day, for it not to be seen as any kind of net loss to the community. Any solution is going to require buy-in, a lot of buy-in from a lot of people. And we're going to have to be able to get the buy-in from the seniors. We're going to have to get buy-in who vote. We're going to have to get buy-in from the young parents, such as Christina, who's raising a family, who knows that she's going to return to the workforce in a few years and needs a safe place for her children to be at. We need to appeal to the people who are empty nesters in town, who have just gotten their kids out of the school system and are looking at retirement in 10 years and aren't looking at their taxes tripling. So, there's a lot of people I think that we have to hit. The task is momentous, but this is, in my opinion, our best ditch effort to get this thing done. I'm pretty committed, but I'm very committed to going back to my normal life and not giving so much free time to the town, as I think everyone else is probably pretty committed to that too. But we have to achieve these results first. And so that's the support I'm looking for from the school committee. And I'm sorry for talking so loud here, but I want to go to Mr. Scullin-Brini as well. Tony.
Dr. Burnham, your comment about the 18 to 22-year-olds it really is pretty significant, because having once upon a time been involved with young, newly turned adults that require education, even though one doesn't necessarily see that age group as being part of a public school group. So my question is, of the 4 programs that are there, how many students are to be provided education because of the circumstances that they're in? Is it just the ACE students? And then I have a follow-up question for you.
So of the 4 programs, there's an educational component to 3 of them. The ACE program is definitely educational. The grant-funded School Community Links program, there's an education component there. It's STEM and literacy. And our play school, preschool program, there's an educational component to that too.
Okay, my follow-up question is, over the last 20 years, or to the best of your collective memory, how many of these types of programs have been in place and how many have gone away? I mean, what is the, you know, the need here? Is this something that kind of comes and goes, or is this something that has come and stays?
I think it's something that has come and has stayed. I believe that the school community link services program has been in this community in some way, shape, or form, even prior to grant funding for more than 25 years, I believe. Extended day, I don't know exactly when extended day came into play, but that is before school care, after school care, and we also run a summer program where the kids come for a full day throughout the summer. But I suspect that that's been probably a couple of decades as well. The Early Learning Center came to be, as I understand it, because there were so many parents that needed to get their kiddos into preschool, and we just don't have enough spaces available to students who would be your typical students. That program is really in play for our special education students, and part of that program requires that you have typical peers for the kiddos to learn from and model with. So I can't say exactly when all of these programs came to be, but there's definitely a need in the community. And I will just say this. Of all of them, the only one that's really truly a school program required by the state
Is ACE.
is the ACE program. Extended day, it is a school program because it's under the umbrella of the school department, but it could also, in other communities, it falls under the umbrella of their recreation department. In urban settings, there are other organizations that offer before and after school care. Boys and Girls Club is one. There are several if you're in an urban setting. We don't have the benefit of that. There's been lots of conversation over the years back and forth between myself and the Boys and Girls Club relative to what they could potentially assist with. And they really can't accommodate any more than the grade levels that they have now. And staffing is a challenge for them as well. I have to be honest, nobody's looking to eliminate extended day, but the reality is going to be, can I staff a program that can run safely? Now, it's a self-sustained model, so the monies that the parents pay for the kids to attend, that's what pays the staff. We could maybe get some more interest if we paid a higher hourly rate, but that means that the parents are also going to have to now pay a higher hourly rate. And that is going to be cost prohibitive for some, and therefore then the numbers are going to drop down in enrollment. So, I think it's a delicate balance, right, of being able to meet the need. But I will say, if I can't safely staff the building, whatever building I'm in, I can't run the program.
Yep.
The numbers of kids have to be in a good ratio to the number of adults. And the adults can't just be high school students, because our high school students rotate in and out. Their schedules change based on the season because they play a sport. We can't run the program with just high school kids. I need to have adults. So when you think about right now, we're operating with 70 at 75 at TCP. If I had to drop to, let's say, 30 in 2 locations, that's a total of 60. So we may see a reduction in a smaller number. Again, if I can get the staff, I can open up more seats. If I can't get the staff, I can't. But I will tell you, I cannot go back to the number of kiddos that were enrolled before they were moved to TCP because it was dangerous.
Yeah. And I think that we can understand that, Dr. Burnham, the limitations that you have. And
Yep.
I think as a community, we're also looking at a 40B project on Howard
Yep.
Street that's going to add
Yep.
in more students, more need. The state is pushing a requirement for us to provide so many acres with a guaranteed by right density. And that, of course, is going to, basically create an urban little environment within our town. And that's going to create more need. So the need's not going away. It's only going to increase. I want to be mindful of time here. So just so we can wrap this up, I'm going to go to someone who's on an iPhone with their hand raised. Say that again?
Carol.
That's me.
Oh, there we go, Karen.
I was trying to save my battery. So at my granddaughter's softball game. But what I wanted to point out was just a couple things. First off, extended day has been in place a very long time. I would drop my 32-year-old son there. So at least 25 years we have had extended day in this community. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the school committee is more than happy to talk about other places these programs can go within the community. But we're in like this chicken and the egg thing, because the school committee would like to talk about Turkey Hill and would like to talk about expanding opportunities at Turkey Hill. As Mr. Beardmore pointed out, we could go beyond the school building funding and add some of these things at Turkey Hill. But as I've tried to pay attention to all of this, and my understanding is we are in line behind TC Passios. So we can't go too far talking about Turkey Hill, because as best I know, we're in line behind TC Passios. But we want to work with the community to figure all this out. We don't want to lose any of these programs. These programs are important, and they're important to the community. They're important to parents. They're important to the education of our kids, which is the role of the school committee. So we are more than happy to work things out, but we didn't think it was our place to say, well, we think we could do this in this empty building in the community. We didn't think as a school committee, it is our place to do that. So we thought kind of that was the municipal building committee. So we are happy to do whatever we can to help you to find places for these programs. And if it means we need to find places for these programs while we deal with whatever we're dealing with the municipal building committee, before we get to TC Passio, to the Turkey Hill, and some of this stuff rolls into Turkey Hill, well, that's another conversation. But we don't know what part of this conversation we're at. We have asked the town manager to attend our June 1st meeting, I believe, and this is part of that conversation. We were going to talk about Turkey Hill. So we're happy to help. We just don't, I guess, know the rules in the ball game we're playing in.
Right.
All right. Well, Carol, first, I appreciate that comment, and hopefully on the select board side, something I mentioned to the superintendent last week is our goal has been to kind of increase our communications, our formal correspondence back and forth. And hopefully you've noticed that there's been a little bit more communication lately, kind of formal. And there should be more of that, and there will be more of that. And I think that, really the goal today was to discuss what you presented. I think that this was a really healthy, good conversation. I think that we've hopefully been clear on our perspectives and kind of what we're looking for. But really, I think that the goal here, Carol, and to the rest of the members of the school committee, is that we're trying to have a process that will take place over the next year. That's going to be a lot of back and forth with us and you via Brian, to be able to ask you questions, get kind of policy positions from you. And again, the first real big one is what would you like to happen at TCP? Because again, if you're as a school committee telling us you'd like to preserve the land for a future school, well, that's a really big ask. And it's one that we can't ignore. If you're also telling us, you know what, whatever the municipality decides on this one, you know, so long as we get a future school, it really doesn't matter to us where it's at. Comments like that, I think, kind of leave the door as open as it currently is. And that also provides the public a statement that the school committee does not support this being a future location for a future school. And so I think we're trying to get some conclusions on some of these kind of open-ended things that are out there. And what you should expect from us is that there will be more communications coming to you formally from Brian. We may not send many invitations, you know, with the week notice to ask you to come. Certainly, we do appreciate you being here today. So if I just want to go through the school committee members, Carol, if you don't mind, if any members, including Brian, have any questions or comments, certainly we are happy to hear them, and that way will also help guide kind of what we do next. So however you want to call your members, Carol.
Oh, sure. Okay. So, Brian, Mr. Leighton and Brian, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Carol. Yeah, speaking as vice chair of the school committee, I would agree with what Carol said. I think even as a committee too, I think the building redesign committee could even consider that, like maybe changing the order. Maybe Turkey Hill is something that we could explore looking at first to try to decide that. Speaking also as a school committee member, I feel like we've had this conversation before that it's not about the location of the school, it's about educating the students, and the location of the school building is not going to matter that much, whether it's at 30 School Street, whether it's at the TCP, whether it's next to where Turkey Hill currently is. I don't think the school committee has much concern over that. I think whatever the town wants and whatever works best for the town and orientation of their buildings. So I don't think there's a concern there. It's just about educating the students and make sure they're in a safe building, and that the educators are in a safe building too. So I think Turkey Hill, it potentially is a good place to start with.
Thank you, Brian. Mrs. Kelly, did you have something you wanted to add?
Not much, just saying I really do appreciate that we're starting this conversation. Carol, you just said the chicken or the egg, and with the Turkey Hill situation, you know, as a school committee member, but more importantly as a parent, it is a concern for me of what we're going to do with Turkey Hill. So I think opening this line of communication is going to be really beneficial going forward, and hopefully we can get some good work done together. I apologize, my 3-year-old is tap dancing upstairs. I hope no one can hear that.
We can't hear that.
No problem, no problem. I do not have, the iPhone does not provide me with the gallery. So I am assuming that Sophie is on the line. Are you, Sophie? And if you are, do you have a comment?
Hi, yes, I am on the line. I just want to echo everything that the other committee members have said. I completely agree with Brian. It really, for me, is what the town wants as far as location goes, as long as the school has the resources that we need in order to adequately educate our kids. I am absolutely in favor of whatever the town wants that to be. I also want to echo what Mrs. Kelly said and say that I think it's absolutely great that we're opening this up. I think the center of our town is a really valuable resource that we've just been sitting on for a number of years. And so I'm really excited to be able to be part of the conversation about hopefully making that a more useful place, a better place for the town. And I'm just really thankful to be here and really thankful to hear all of your perspectives.
Great.
Thank you. And is Tony on the line?
He's not.
Okay. Well, then that would be the school committee perspective.
All right. And Dr. Burnham, do you have any final comments for us here tonight?
Just one thing that takes us back. Oh my gosh. Can it really be a year and a half ago? With the TCP building committee, there was a conversation. We had taken a walk through both the teen center and the Ritter building to see if it was at all possible that either of those buildings could accommodate the school department buildings, right? Like the office space, knowing that the ACE program would have to be co-located with our Director of Special Services. And there were challenges with the Ritter building, but I think the Ritter offered more opportunity, but there would have been costs associated with upgrading the building to provide confidential office space. Right now, there isn't confidential office space because the walls only go about 3/4 high. So that would be problematic. And like I said, we did also walk the teen center. I don't think that the teen center could accommodate co-location with either the early learning center or the community school link services program because of the play equipment, all of the toys, that go along with either of those programs. I'm sure that, the 14 and 15-year-olds don't want to come in and play in the toddler kitchen in the afternoon. So just know that we have taken an opportunity, as part of this bigger conversation. Mr. Leighton can maybe verify, it was about 1.5 years ago, I think we had that kind of conversation.
And Dr. Brown, just so that I can understand as well, the Ritter building, if we were to have a new HVAC system in there, we had walls that went from floor to ceiling and could provide you with the privacy, the office privacy. Do you believe that building could accommodate school office functions and the ACE program?
I'd have to walk through it again, but I think it's doable.
Yep.
Again, thered have to be some potential small construction to carve out some additional office space in the larger area as you go down the steps from the main entry.
Yep.
But I think potentially that if there would be support for that level of investment, I think that's a possibility.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Dr. Burnham. Thank you, Carol, and the members of the school committee for your time this evening. I know we went a little longer than I had projected, but if you want to, I should refer to him as Mrs. Archambault, but would you like to call it adjourn your meeting and then we'll move forward with the rest of our.
Most certainly. Do I have a motion to adjourn the school committee meeting? I can't call on you because I can't see you, so somebody jump in.
I'll just go. This is Sophie Shapiro. I'll make a motion to adjourn at 7 p.m.
And a second, please.
This is Laura Kelly. I will second that.
And could we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Archambault.
Yes, and thank you for inviting us to this conversation.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right. We'll just give them a minute to drop off here, and if anyone needs to take a water break before we keep going. No? Okay. All right, so let's see. We can, on our side, we can continue. With there any other final comments that we want to give to Brian to relay? Any final comments there in this conversation?
I just have a question. So I know we talked about the Turkey Hill build. Are we going to combine those now, or are we just saying like in the future we can put it here because then it'll go to Turkey Hill? I just want to be clear on our stance on that because I know that got thrown in a few times.
Well, we don't have anything to do with Turkey Hill
Okay,
at all.
that's what I thought, but the way they were talking about it made it seem like we're a part of that now, and I'm like, oh no.
Well, I think they are, because they're the school committee. That's the next school that needs to get rehabilitated or built. And I think that the only part of the conversation, I think that the tie-in was extended day. That if a long-term plan is for extended day to be housed at the new Turkey Hill Elementary School, that will need a temporary plan between now and then.
I think we also We also want to talk about what's in TCP and where that's going to be going, whether it's short-term and long-term, so that the community is aware of it too. So I think we're a part of that conversation.
Yep. Okay. Any other kind of final comments before we move on from this? Tony?
I think there really is a need. You know, these programs, while they're called different things and they have been different things over the years, there's an educational component to activities that are currently taking place in TC Passios that, you know, had maybe been someplace else, as Peter had mentioned, but that's a community need that's not disappearing. And the question, I think, for us is to say, is this a part of a municipal design function? You know, should we consider that community need or not? And get to that point fairly quickly, because I think it's going to have an impact on what we decide for Town Hall, for Ritter, and what's going to happen with the rest of TC Passios.
Okay. Matt, Mr. Allison.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't disagree with whatever the school wants to do, they can do. They pretty much do anyway, they always have. And they always get 2/3 right off the top of our annual budget. So every taxpayer pays at a minimum 60-something% of their taxes towards the schools. Now, I want to reiterate some of the concerns that I had with mixed use as far as schools and municipal space. Is currently we're a municipal building design committee, but schools got wiggled into that charge. I don't think it should have, but that's not for me to say. What is for me to say as a member of this committee is that I don't think that should happen. I think that schools should stay on school property, on school campus with all their school requirements, and that municipal should stay municipal and be open to the public at any time, because we paid $72 million for a high school and all the facilities are locked to anybody that's not a student, apparently, for the most of the time, right?
Yes.
Correct? Yeah, okay. So we paid a whole bunch of money on that and it's only used by the schools, which is fine. I can see that because they keep talking about security and that's dangerous and they're special. Well, you know what? We're all kind of special when it comes right down to it. And I understand that people with children have a certain affection towards that child that's different than I'll ever understand. Granted, okay? But anyways, I just want to remind whoever needs to be reminded that this was a school building and then they didn't want to continue to pay the upkeep on it and they didn't want to continue to keep taking care of it, so they passed it off to the town. Now, for whatever reason, they think that it's okay, that they want to have a good portion of the new reuse be theirs and still be owned by the town, and they still get 66% off the top. Okay, so their 66% hasn't changed, but they're paying less of that 66% on the offices and space and the whatever they're using. So people keep talking about there's nothing to do. Well, it's because everything that's funded is either schools or fire or police at a library. So we got a new primary school, we got a new public safety building, we got a new library, we got a new high school. Now we're trying to reuse TC Passios as a municipal space for the townspeople, and we're getting chopped off of that. And now we can't even finish looking at what we're going to do for town offices before we start having to talk about Turkey Hill. I'm really, really frustrated. I think it's obvious.
I hear you, Mr. Allison. I think there's a lot of frustration to go around. I'm trusting that that membership in committees changes. I got an email the other day, and I get on the select board, we get a lot of complaints. I don't think we get many emails that say good job. Most of them are a request or a complaint, and one of them was a concern about something that we were doing and how we keep repetitiously doing certain thing. And of course the comment is, well, the last time we did this was an entirely different membership. So is it, it's not necessarily the same people. And I'd be hard pressed to say that I don't think any of the current members of the school committee voted or was pushing to get that off the rolls. Neither was the superintendent, the current superintendent in office. But I do understand what you're saying, is that the school committee and the school department came forward with a request that they had no future use for the building, and that you can go to future municipal uses, and then we found a way to fill it back up. All right. Any more comments before we move on to our agenda discussion of Mr. Beardmore and Brian? Yeah. Okay, Mr. Beardmore and then Brian.
So I remiss not to reply to some of Mr. Allison's comments.
You're gonna correct the 66%.
Well, for starters, I think we need to be careful when we're citing numbers that the numbers are accurate. With respect to the omnibus budget, we hover, this year it actually went down as a total percentage of the omnibus budget. I think it was about 56% this year. The numbers are a little hazy because there are burdens that the town picks up when it comes to administration of benefits, retired teachers, those kinds of things. But I think 66% is a pretty gross exaggeration. It's probably closer to 60 when it's all said and done. But I think we should be careful when we talk about those numbers. I think it's also important to point out that what we do in our school department is mandated by the state. We do fund our school department above foundation funding. We participate in Monty Tech, which is right at foundation funding, give or take a few $100,000. And when it comes to capital investments, right now, we are funding debt service today that funds a public safety building, a library, and 2 school buildings. We also fund a capital plan. Last year, the capital plan was about 5 or 6% school department related capital. This year, because we added the AC for a building that's, in my opinion, been neglected since we built it 20 years ago, we were closer to 20% school department funding on the capital plan. So I think the town has actually done a pretty good job at balancing our needs. And you've heard me, as recent as last Saturday, very critical on some of these topics. But the reality is that what we're mandated to do and what we have to do and how we balance the needs of all of our citizens, I think has been pretty good when you compare it to towns closer to Boston that are going for overrides every year and they're failing, and towns far west of us that just don't have the financial resources and their schools perform way below average. We're right on the cusp of that top third in the state when it comes to performance. And I think that is somewhat a result of the investment that we put into these programs. And when you spend money, by the way, in preschool, that's money that oftentimes you don't have to spend in special education and special services in high school and beyond. So I think we should be measured and careful about how we talk about those investments. And I'll get off my soapbox.
Brian?
Thanks. I think even Tony mentioned it too. There's the need for a lot of these programs that we see in the community. The parents need them for the before school programs, the after school programs. I think I always go back to the Boys and Girls Club. Everybody knows that the Boys and Girls Club is a vital component to the community, but that only serves that small group of the 5th through 8th graders. And once you get past 8th grade, the high school kids, they don't need the after school programs. But the early centers are going to take care of the younger kids. Yes, I'm going to open the door in a minute. So I think that you got to connect that the early programs are really for that younger group. I think we're getting to the same page too, that the town hall is likely, like Matt said, it's going to be more of a community center. I don't think you're going to see the schools in a new town hall. and we're gonna have to find space for those. But I think it's working with the superintendent to find those spaces. I did want to note that there is night adult programs like basketball. There's an adult basketball program and volleyball program that does go run through the Community Links program, and they do play in the school. So just want to add that, but definitely we can have more expansion there. And the only way I see the schools really keeping their programs in a community building is if we just painted TCP and done touch-ups, but I don't think that's probably the direction that the town is going to go for. I think that was it. Thanks.
Christina?
Sorry. So I just kind of had a question because this was brought, I didn't go to the last town meeting, but the one before where the discussion around the TCP was brought up, and there was a lot of people that were angry because they were saying, you know, the extended day before a day is privately funded. It's like outside of the school, but it seems like it is funded, self-funded by the town, by the school. And so it's like an outside program, or is it?
No,
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
it's administered by the school department, but it's funded through an enterprise account. So basically, it's the money that parents pay for their students to be in it.
Mhm.
That pays the expenses of the program, including the staff, including rent to the town for TCP,
Yeah.
which basically covers custodial services, is my understanding.
But
So it's under the auspices of the school department, but it's not funded through the general budget.
But
Hey, real
it's-
quick, I just have to step away for about a minute. I'll be right back.
But it's not like Peter and Brian's private preschool that's like, or after school that's making a fortune. It's basically like paid to serve. Like people
Yeah.
are paying what
Yeah,
it
nobody's
costs to run.
making
There's
money
no
Nobody's
okay.
making money off of it.
So
We cover the teachers. Yeah.
okay, because I think some of the impression the town gets was it is like for profit for somebody else outside the town. And it's kind of like well, that's what I kind of got out of it. But it's also, I think, worth noting, explaining what the ACE program is. Because if you haven't had someone in it, okay, it's for 18 to 22-year-olds, but it's not a normal 18 to 22-year-old. It's someone that needs help. And whether they get it here or through other programs, they're still state-funded programs.
Well,
You
no,
do
they're
where-
state mandated
They're
programs.
That's
mandated.
what-
Legally, we have to. Yeah, legally,
Yeah.
we have to educate students if up all the way to 22. And
But it-
some students aren't ready to graduate at 18.
No, but it's also, it's a part of the school, but it's not a part of a school. So it's a fine
We have to
line.
bus them. Yeah, we would
Yeah.
have to bus them to another program and get them to a different program if we decided not to run it ourselves.
Yeah.
And similar, like if these younger programs too were housed in a new building or an outside building, the rent would just make the prices so high that people wouldn't want to choose them.
Yeah.
So-
Preschool. Awful.
So it sounds like coming out of that conversation that there was, first, I just want to note that I think that it was really good to have the members of the school committee present. Brian, I'm really thankful that you guys were able to muster a quorum here in a pretty short period of time. So I'm really thankful for that. I think that a lot of the topics that came up were good. The conversation was good, as I previously mentioned. But I really do look forward to there being some continued conversation about how to work on a temporary plan. Because I think that we really need to plan that the TCP would be out of play. And we need to kind of get a vision of what that means and where everything goes while it's out of play. So the next thing on our agenda, and we kind of have a standard agenda here, was to continue reviewing our Vertex TAP A and DeGiorgio reports to identify the recommendations at Ritter Building and at Town Hall. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you the document that I compiled that has all this. The font is little, so let me just go ahead and screen share. And where's that? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to enlarge this so everyone can see. So we're going to start with the tracked needs. So on the right side where we had our tracked needs, and can everyone see this all right? Yes, good. So on the right side where we have our tracked needs, these are the things that we've previously identified as needing to happen. So, Ritter needing a hazardous materials abatement. Also the Vertex identifying that the TC pass hills required a hazardous material abatement. And then the notes that we had of what needed to happen were really broad. Vertex year 2 Town Hall, Vertex year 1 Ritter, and not much specificity to them. Now, what I've highlighted in yellow over here are things that we did identify from the Vertex or TAP-A report. It's all really from the Vertex. And the yellow identifies things that were identified and then what was allocated and that has occurred or will occur and is approved. So if we go by Town Hall, so what was sent over regarding Vertex Town Hall, this is the ADA ramp sidewalk that the fiscal year 22 included Town Hall repairs to cut out and replace the sealants between the siding and the wall penetrations, to replace the windows of the basement level, replace the existing roof, replace the chimney. This work is not yet complete. Fiscal year 23, this was the Town Hall Vertex year 2, items 7 through 11 and 13, which is replacing 2 furnace units that heat and cool the second floor. And that is what's been done for Town Hall. Now, what was also identified, and I'm staying with Vertex here for Town Hall, was that we needed to add some insulation under the sinks in the restrooms, that we need to secure some wires in the basement. Now, I needed to follow up with Heather on this. I did not on this specific question of the wires. I know that there was some work that was done this year and some that should be happening next year. And then also to one of the recommendations was to secure the interior water meter and the connections to the wall. TAP-A identified for Town Hall, and I really appreciate, I think this was Christina who included page numbers here for me, which was really helpful, that the wood posts have rot and not fully supported by the stone pedestals, that there's leaking through the stone foundation, that floor joists are deflecting and pegs and connections are missing, that added beams are not stable, do not have any mechanical connection to the structure. And this is all basement level. And then also that there needs to be an outdoor vent for the mechanicals that are located in the basement. In the attic roof area, it was noted that the framing for the roof decking is undersized, that there's significant rot and the large wood beam in the front gable is greatly compromised. It's also noted for the HVAC that it was installed in 2015 in good condition, that the entrances don't have heaters, which would help with some of the heat loss, and that the building is poorly insulated. This is a summarization that the building is poorly insulated and that staff are using space heaters. And that triggers into the electrical concerns that those space heaters are causing multiple nuisance tripping due to the space heaters. And then there was also the note that the fire protection system needs an upgrade to have the new fire code requires that there's a voice that comes over and tells you to evacuate the building.
So Michael Ray, the most recent capital plan addressed HVAC to some extent, but I'm not sure to what extent relative to this report. Do you know?
Yes, so it was what I noted here, and that was coming from Vertex, and that was the
FY23. Okay, but we don't. But what isn't clear is what the Vertex spending affects in terms of the TAP-A findings.
correct.
So I included that because it's like 8 years old, 7
Yeah.
years old. So if it's in good condition then, and I know systems last for like 20 years, but they do need things done. So I just thought it'd be worth including because I didn't know what additional costs would come with it.
Yeah, I think that Peter, I think that some of what was noted in the Vertex, none of it will be addressed in the basement requests, but there is a
Specifically, the HVAC stuff is what I was getting to.
Yeah, so the work, I talked to Heather about this in more detail and kind of just looked through the capital plan in a little bit more detail. Really, I would summarize this work as cooling on the second floor. That's how I would best summarize what was approved, as second floor cooling. Another way of saying it is that we're also looking to replace some of the furnace units that are in the building, and this is not the general, because we do have a relatively new system in there. So I can get back to you on this, Peter, with the detail that you're looking for sure. I think I understood it to be that it was reading through all this when I was compiling it. my understanding of it, I'm not doing a good job explaining, so I'll get back to you on the details. of
Okay,
that.
so my understanding when we reviewed the capital plan was that we're putting 2 HVAC units in the attic of that building,
That's correct.
and those should cover us from a heating and cooling perspective on the second floor.
That's correct.
But the problem is that it's heating and cooling with the current configuration on the second floor. So if
Correct.
we were ever to reconfigure that space, then that's going to have some ramifications in terms of whether that totally meets the need or not.
Yes. Yep. So now, one thing that I want to point out from a building perspective is, it's the lipstick on the pig problem. It's the you have a building that has interior needs, attic problems, HVAC problems, electrical problems, plumbing problems, fire protection needs, and the funding is going to the exterior of these buildings. And so, it almost perpetuates the problem where people drive by and they say the building looks fine. And it doesn't address all the interior stuff that needs to happen inside the buildings. Similarly at Ritter has the focus has been on the exterior with the new ADA ramp construction. This hasn't happened yet. Fiscal year 22 when it was approved, and that design money has already happened. And then also some envelope repair work that is occurring, should be happening about now. And then we have a kitchen remodel. This was a staff thing that was not showing up on, it really wasn't on any reports. I just added it here because it happened. And that was just a small kitchen remodel. And that's what we have from feedback that we've received from the reports. And then Tape Ritter, I don't have any comments there yet from the members. So that's what we're tracking so far for what the facility recommendations are. How I read this, my translation of this is what's left over is really related to town hall. These are some serious structural issues, but they're going to need to be addressed when the full building use gets addressed. That there's no way to plan for future use that doesn't address these things. And so I see them as something that doesn't need to happen separate from the future planning. And the same thing here in the attic area that was identified, that these are things that will need to be addressed. I don't see some things like, clock tower has water damage, but it's not currently leaking. There was on this portion, the significant rot in the large wood beam in the front gable. There was the addition of some steel that was added into the area a few years back. And then you also have undersized framing for the roof decking, and this was really the comment was in comparison to current building code.
Yeah.
And so
we're not going to make a 200-year-old building brand new.
Yeah. And generally, and in the engineering kind of world, and Mr. Allison can speak to this one more than I can, but generally, if a building stood for 20 years, whatever the plan was worked technically. And so, whatever the planning was, technically it's worked. The roof hasn't fallen in 100 and something to almost 200 years. So technically the plan works. So I see these things as things that need to get addressed, but nothing that is like the exterior stuff. So I do think that, this is what we have compiled so far for what we're looking at. So this was really helpful. I think as a good exercise to identify what we see as needing to happen, what's already happened and what's left over. The summary here really is all this really is tied into any future use planning, which is a good thing. Matt.
Yeah, you said something about the exterior of the town hall. Did you say that?
I did.
Is that on this list?
It is. It has not fully happened, but it is on the list. It's
okay.
It's in this area. So fiscal year 22 and 23. And let me enlarge that a little bit there.
Okay, because I'm recalling a conversation that was had between the people who painted it last time, and they said that there's no way this siding is going to last any more than 10 more years.
Mm-hmm.
The whole envelope, I believe.
Yeah, that's probably a fair comment.
The wood siding, the actual.
Yeah, like the paint was actually holding it together.
Yep.
The clapboards.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I mean, if you really look at Town Hall now, I mean, it's only was painted, what, 2 years ago? You already see the separations happening because the building keeps moving. You know, so. All right, I'm gonna stop screen sharing here. So I thought that that was a good, healthy exercise. I hope you guys did as well. I'm trusting that you guys did as well. So that way we can identify any kind of glaring hole. So there are a couple points of information that's still missing. So if you have not submitted a response, please do. I did get most of the responses, I think, from the members who were here. So I'm probably preaching to the choir on this one. Peter, you want to say something?
Yeah, so, you know, the capital plan, we've been kind of diligently working down the vertex stuff on the capital plan. And I don't know exactly if it's going year to year back and forth between those two buildings, but every year we've made an investment in the capital plan to go to one side or the other, Ritter or Town Hall, and whatever's next in the list of the capital plan. It feels like we're making good progress, at least from a funding perspective, if not the work actually getting done, but those dollars are encumbered. But at some point, it feels as if like we need to make a substantial investment in those buildings to make them whole, or so that we're confident that those buildings are going to continue to function even in their current state for another 10 or 20 years or whatever. There's like a chunk of money that needs to go there. And then there's a chunk of money like to bring it up to whatever we're going to program those buildings to be. And I think that there's some overlap there, right? Like some of that money, for example, it doesn't make sense to spend much money on the interior of Ritter until we know what the floor plan of Ritter ought to look like going forward, right? Like, but we could spend money on the interior of Ritter today if we thought we were going to keep the building functions in it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that we've got to figure out a way of articulating what I've just really inarticulately tried to communicate, just to kind of visually show those, you know, sort of the current knowns and the future unknowns, or whatever.
Yep. No, I'm with you on that one. And that's exactly, I think, what I was trying to probably say as well, is that the things that have to happen to secure the building are done, and everything else is really related to use, and it will need to be done when we figure out those uses. Christina, and then Brian.
I guess my question is, like, looking at this, we're paying to, you know, rewire or are they securing wires? Or are they rewiring Town Hall?
So, yeah, so that is securing the wires. It's
Okay.
because there's really what has happened over time is, and I know I have a photo of this, so let me just go ahead and pull the photo up.
It was pretty crazy.
So yeah, let me just pull this photo up because I think the full photo is going to say it all. Yeah.
But I guess my question is, why are we paying someone to secure wires when the current wires in there aren't, like, the current electrical in there doesn't work if we're having all these issues, and now they're putting 2 new units in the attic? I mean,
so part of this is, so the work that when we say electrical work, you see this kind of setup that's going on in the basement of Town Hall. Is this large enough for everyone to see?
that rat nest of wires.
Yes. It is cleaning up the rat nest of wires. It's because this is really not appropriate. And it's over time, as certain wires get added, others get decommissioned but never get removed. And so what you have is this rat nest. And so this was, when I said the wires, this rat nest was in part cleaned up, and there was supposed to be more work happening on it as well. So it's not really rewiring Town Hall as much as it's taking what is really not appropriate and trying to make some sense out of it. So that way it's a little more compliant with electrical codes. Tony?
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Brian. I'm sorry, Brian. I'm sorry.
Thanks. I also serve on capital planning, so I just wanted to throw out some stuff there too. So the DPW director presents a lot of the building stuff, and it is more than just these 2 buildings too. So we had Brooks House on the list too, and the actual DPW. So it's just the safety building. So there's a lot of buildings and there's a lot of stuff that needs to get done. And they come to capital planning with just some of the items that need to get done. And then they have a plan, long-term plan, that they're going to be coming each year with more and more projects. So definitely something to consider. I know even just discussing at capital planning with the Ritter building, there was talk about removing the lead paint and the asbestos. But then the concern is, okay, well, what does the building actually look like after we're done removing it? Is there going to be carpeting now put down? Is there new flooring and walls put up? So that's definitely something that we want to keep communicating with capital planning and the town manager to make sure that we time that well, that if we are doing a renovation, say for the school offices or whoever, that we kind of time that well and take that into consideration.
All right. Tony.
You're muted.
Okay, so Peter, I think that your comment about we got things we got to do, and then we got to figure out what is it that's going to be the end state for town hall or town facilities for in say the next 10 to 15 years. I think that's really the heart of the task for the committee. But I think that you know, I want to caution everybody, when you look at pictures like the one we just saw, I've seen a lot worse. And most of the wiring that is rat's nest wiring is associated with coaxial cable, telephone cables, because that has changed significantly over the years. Now, there is electrical wiring issues that need to be resolved, but electrical wiring issues are so much different than, you know, the communication or networking wiring issues that, you know, were a large part of what that picture is. You know, when was town hall painted? Because I think that's a really important piece. In Matt, I think you said it was painted a couple of years ago. Now it couldn't be 2 years ago, because I've lived in Lunenburg for 2 years, coming up the 1st of June. And town hall was painted at least before I moved in here, because I remember seeing it, you know, kind of transform itself. And, you know, one of the issues, and I'm going to start talking like a member of the APDC here, is that, just warning you, but I got to tell you that if the paint was peeling, then I would be a lot more concerned about the condition of the siding at town hall. It's not peeling. Now, there certainly are issues that need to be addressed, but paint peels when water gets behind paint. Paint doesn't stay on buildings if woodwork is staying dry. And I see there being a lot of good sound paint surfaces at town hall. Same for Ritter. There are issues. But one of the other things that we need to think about in terms of this, what's the future going to be? How are we going to operate in town hall? How are we going to operate in Ritter? Is that the town's going to hire a facilities director. And I can't wait for that facilities director to get on board, because I think that the first thing that we could get from the facilities director is what are the real priorities in terms of maintenance, and then start looking at him to give us recommendations on how best to use the buildings. You know, the TABI study was really focused on coming up with kind of a space or a space solution. It wasn't like Vertex. Vertex is far more engineer based. What needs to be fixed in the buildings? And we're making a lot of progress, you know, and I think one of the reasons why these buildings aren't as bad as they could be is because we are doing the work that's recommended in Vertex. We're going to do a whole bunch of work in Ritter that was recommended by Vertex. So, you know, we clearly have buildings that have potential. We need to figure out how to make those buildings meet the needs of the town, you know, say 10 years down the road. It makes no sense to just do the maintenance without looking at that 10-year down the road. I've been in town hall more than I have ever imagined over the last couple of weeks. And every time I go in there, I look at the building and I say, it's pretty sound, but it's a mess, you know, and I think that's a functionality issue. And that's what we need to focus on in terms of what do we do for the next 20, like, how do we make sure these buildings work for the next 20 years? That's my input.
All right. As always, appreciated, Tony. All right, any other comments before we just briefly talk through the rest of the agenda before we adjourn? No, all right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just share with everyone just the agenda here, and I have it on the pages just so we can discuss it for a sec. I have it on the website. Can everyone see this? Okay. So on the so we've had our public comments, we've discussed extended day, and we're here on number 3. I think we're pretty much good with number 3. So the next thing that we really need to do, and we're not going to do this today, but the next part of, I think, our process based on the roadmap that we laid out for ourselves of what we need to accomplish is to actually, let me just go ahead and pull that roadmap up so that way I can have that handy of kind of these areas. So let me stop sharing so I can start resharing on this other thing. All right. And let me know when you can see this okay.
Got it.
All right, so when we kind of talked about what we wanted to do, the first thing we said was we wanted to kind of review the reports to better understand what's occurred. So, we've achieved this, developed lists per building, detailing the recommendations and what's forecast in the future capital plan. And then also, and then we had separately kind of facility requirements. And this is something that Mr. Scalambrini just referenced. And as I recall, we were kind of talking about what were those needs in these buildings. Now, unfortunately, I think my hope was that we would pull in Kit into this process, who's our facilities kind of day-to-day manager. Unfortunately, he's been out on leave since about January due to illness. And so we do have our kind of facility technician who's been working, but he's really kind of new into the role, is not going to be able to provide this kind of high level like we were planning. And so I think that this section, facility requirements, is likely something we're going to need to pick up once we have our new facility manager in place, who's had the chance to kind of do more than to walk through the buildings, to kind of get more familiarity and identify what all of these needs are going to be for these buildings. So the next thing that I think we're at in the process before we get to our developing the timeline is reviewing our prioritization of programs. And this is going into the wants, the needs, the co-locations, what we cannot accommodate, and also discussing who pays rent. So we started somewhat of this. Today was the beginning of this conversation with the schools, because again, their component is a really big chunk of this. And then what comes next, and I'll stop screen sharing, and then I'm going to share again on this. So I will after this meeting distribute this document. And what this document is, and let me just step out of it a little bit so you can see it better. It's the editable version of it. And it's looking, so this version can be edited, and I'm going to send it to you as a PDF and also in a version that you can edit. So that way, if you so choose to play with some of these numbers, you can. But this is from DeGiorgio Associates. This is the worksheet that they compiled that identifies all of our space needs based on their work. And so it's an occupancy count, pretty long spreadsheet on the first page. And the second tab here is the actual versus the program areas. And this is existing. We've discussed this in a previous meeting. But again, I'll send this out to everyone after this meeting. So that way, between now and our next meeting, you have the time to review this. So that way, when we come here, we can have a conversation on space needs in a little more detail and kind of identify questions. So again, I'm going to email this to everyone. We're really not going to discuss it today, but I just want to let you know what's coming. All right. So that way, for our next meeting, we'll be in a good position to start talking about what those program needs are, the areas where we can clearly identify concerns or questions. And then we can start the process of reviewing the current prioritization list, which we've done in part already, review the existing and requested space needs, and then come up with a criteria for reprioritization. So if, as homework, we can all kind of just think about that criteria for reprioritization of things that we want to kind of set for ourselves for how we're going to reprioritize space needs requests. another part of that as well is if you're really feeling creative, I would also ask for you to kind of just lay out based on what you know now, what your ideal kind of layout is. So if you were, use Peter Beardmore's phrase, king for a day or queen for a day, and this is entirely up to you to decide based on what you know now, what would you do? And in terms of what's going where, and this really is a bit premature, but I think we may find some good information out of this. I expect that we're going to find some commonalities. And so that would be a good conversation to have next time. So I'm going to send you the prioritization list, and if you can kind of develop criteria for that reprioritization and also your ideal. So I just heard the wind blow, and I'm guessing rain's about to start soon.
Are we able to like send, or as a committee, I guess that might be for next time, can we send an email to those people asking if their space needs have changed? Like obviously the numbers were kind of done during pre-COVID. So now that I'm sure people have changed their work styles over the last 2 years, can we go back to people and say, is this number still accurate? Because I'm sure a lot has changed from then to now. It's not that people are as required to be in the office. So that might change our layout as well.
I think that I would say that I would not really be in favor of re-engaging them. I think, and the reason why is we spent quite a bit of money engaging them the first time and all their space needs and really coming back to them. I think our task at hand is to cut it down. Is that we got the wish list, and I think we need to just start chopping away at it. And then we go back to them and say, this is what we've said may work. Let me word this a little differently, because that sounds probably a little more aggressive than I want to sound, 5 days out from an election.
Not too late to get that write-in campaign going.
Michael Ray, you never asked anybody that you've asked once before, have your space needs changed? Because there's only one way that question gets asked. They never say, I need less space.
Yeah,
they never do that.
Never. So never. I think, Christina, what we found was that there was a lot of requests that came out that were much higher than what we expected. And our first go around of this, we didn't challenge the schools as much. We had a lot of questions, and then we kind of accepted their answers. And the same thing with the town uses. We listened to their request, and we didn't challenge it as much. I think that the goal here is that we need to challenge. And so when we come up with kind of our criteria for reprioritization, I think the goal is that we are going to need to incorporate some of those lessons we've learned over the last 2 years and how we look at space. And so when we see that someone's requesting an office or a conference room inside of their office, I think now is after we come up with our reprioritization, we will need to engage all of the departments to say, hey, this is where we think your space can fit. And let me know if you think this will meet your current and future needs. That's kind of, I think, where the next phase of this is. That I think we really exhausted the staff wish list. And now I think we need to turn that wish list into practical, what we can actually do, if that makes sense. So that's really the goal, I think, of the next meeting. Our real focus is just focusing on reprioritization criteria, not so much getting into the weeds, but really just criteria. And then if we all can, whoever wants to present kind of ideas of, if you're king, queen for a day, how are you going to lay this out? How are you going to have the town function? So on the communications to and from the committee, we also had questions to the town manager. I'll read you the responses. So the questions were, number one, can we digitize records instead of storing them? Number two, can we send paper records to be stored off-site, such as in Iron Mountain? And then number three, the product just approved at town meeting was the third question. Do we need everything that we're storing? So that was the third question. Do we need everything that we're storing, and how often are records purged? And so the response that we got back from the town manager was about digitizing records. I have new information received last week that we would be able to digitize records that would replace paper copies if we can document that we will continue to keep them in a format that is accessible. such as at one point floppy disks were widely used for storage. Perhaps in the future, cloud storage would not be the right storage method. I'm going to work on putting together a formalized plan with all of our departments in the public records retention storage project. We'll first look at destroying all the records that we no longer have to retain, then look at all the records that we can destroy the paper copies of if we have them digitally stored. Paper storage of any paper records, and cataloging all of our records for retention and location. Digitization of what records we can, there's a missing word here, will reduce our overall square footage needs for storage. More to come once I look into what is involved on the digital plan. The second question about can we send things off-site? The response was that I would not say that it's optimal for the town. Records that are not digital need to be easily accessible in order to respond to public records requests within the required time frame. And there are times that departments need to look back into records for information. It doesn't need to be in the same building as the town offices, but in my opinion, it should be within another town-owned property. And then the third question of, do we need everything that we're storing and how often are records purged? The response was that the project that was just approved, the $62,500 for town records, that project will purge everything that we are not required to keep according to the Secretary of State's retention schedule, and it will also catalog the remaining records and flag those records on the dates they can be destroyed. Each department is responsible for retaining and destroying records per the Secretary of State's retention schedule. So that was a lot of words. The bottom line of this is that the overall square footage of what's needed for town records is going to notably decrease. That we will move to digitize all town records that can be digitized, so that the only things that we actually are keeping are things that we must keep an actual paper copy of on hand, on file. And that the town will make a concerted effort to locate anything offsite that it can locate offsite, even if offsite means at another town building. So for us, this is significant because when we look at the plans for the town needed storage, school needed storage, I mean, we're talking, I think we were at over like 6,000 square feet for storage alone. And so, when we apply that $400, $500 per square foot multiplier to that, we're saving millions of dollars. And so that is a huge success. I did have a conversation as well outside of the meeting with the superintendent about how well they can do that, as I did tonight with school records. And it seems rather promising that they can come up with the same similar type result. So that is all promising stuff to help decrease square footage needs.
Hey, Michael Ray, one thought, I mean, this is great news. Assuming we can follow through with the plan and make that part of our operational discipline to actually get rid of stuff that we're not required to keep. One of the things that comes up every year in our finance committee meetings with public safety leaders, in particular the police chief, is they have record storage for the police department that is in that attic space over the westernmost end of the public safety building. And they've kind of put on their long-term plan that they'd love to create a more formal, better record storage in that space. If we could reduce our total amount of records to the point that we could get all of our town records into that space, like that would be a worthwhile investment to actually put money into creating a record storage facility that is within the public safety footprint so that we know it's secure and kind of solve that, I mean, the town clerk is going to need birth certificate books and those kind of, like, everybody's going to need a certain amount of close records, but for the longer term stuff, like, I mean, that would be ideal if we could kind of move that out of the office space footprint into some other place and kill multiple birds with fewer stones. I think that would be great.
Tell you that item was on the capital plan request by the police department as well, but just didn't happen this year.
Yeah, and I mean, it's come up year after year, and it doesn't fall into a high priority because there is no, you know, raging fire, literally or figuratively, going on there.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe it's something we could address if we could make it part of a bigger, more
Affordably.
comprehensive plan.
Yeah, rather than building a new building that has designated space for that. If we can keep it out of a new building, that would save so much money.
Yeah, I mean, and basically this is just plywood. It's a lot of square footage up there, but it's plywood, right? So can we turn it into something better?
Do you guys know the cost of that offhand? Was it super expensive or was it just something that gets skipped because it's not, like you said?
I don't
Yeah,
recall the number.
It wasn't in the description that Peter has stated as a town-wide storage. It wasn't presented like that.
Right.
just-
The request that they've made has been specifically for police department records. But in my thinking, if you look at that space, and the police chief, as much as admits, there's a lot of stuff in that space right now that's all sitting in cartons on the floor that they don't need to retain either. Like, you know, if we were to get to the point where we're really reducing documents, then maybe that space could be, you know, usable for the town.
And I think if it's put in that view, I think that might have a better chance in the following years.
I will send a communication to the select board on this question for us to look into and explore.
And
Has
also on
anybody
that
ever
same-
been, I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So also in that same vein, the food pantry was also upstairs above the fire. And I don't know if those two spaces are separated because fire and police are separated.
They're not, yeah, so
Okay.
it's not even anywhere near it. Matt, it's the food pantry space was kind of in the front area, right near where the fire trucks are kept, if you will, but upstairs.
Okay.
And in the back of that is where they have their gymnasium equipment. They actually have a pretty decent little gym back there. And basically what that's turned into is just kind of I was in there 4 or 5 months ago, and it's kind of turned into more records, to be honest with you, but not even as formally kept as the ones that the police department has.
So I'll
So-
add, the fire department also had a request to capital planning as well. for
Oh, okay,
similar
I didn't
item.
recall that.
All right.
I have a
Again,
little
didn't make
anecdote
it this year.
about digital records. I went to find the cable TV franchise agreement between the town and Comcast. I couldn't find it anywhere in the town of Lunenburg. I instantly found it on the mass.gov website, you know, which is really kind of interesting. A document that you would think, if it had a great value, it would be something that we could find on the lunenburg.gov website, but that wasn't the case. So I think there's a lot of potential for us to get paper to a digital product.
So another piece of good news is that, you know, part of the IT plan for the next year or two is not only are they renovating the network, but they're also, we will have a contract in place that will continually update the platform for the website and also address the website, which is a nightmare in and of itself, just in terms of how it's organized and managed. So my hope is, if, you know, we were to fast forward 2 years from now, it would be a lot easier, less cumbersome, and clearer where to put stuff on that site, and also the search capability. Like, I went searching for something specific on there a couple of months. It led to a long chain sort of argument with the town manager on how to find stuff on the website, because there was a document that clearly was posted and clearly was titled with what it needed to be, but you couldn't search on it. And it, you know, so there's a lot to be done there in terms of transparency and public access and those kinds of things.
All right. No, you know, I know it probably feels as though we haven't made a lot of progress, but I think we have so far in terms of what we've done since this building redesign or building our committee renaming. You know, I mean, the task in front of us really is to make this viable project. And, you know, I think it's quite successful in the sense that We're already working on decreasing our square footage needs for storage. That's notable. Where we've been working on, the engagement with the school committee today and prior to today. I think it's going to really kind of help minimize the square footage needed for some of the extended day programs or the after school programs that are happening in the TCP, and that we have programmed into a future redesign building that's going to help decrease square footage. And so we are whittling this down now as we move along to less stuff to need to find permanent homes for. And that is a really big success area. Our meeting next week, or on the 16th of May, I'm sorry, today is the 16th, on the 6th of June, our meeting on the 6th of June being focused on reprioritization. My hope is that, it will be the start of a conversation that we will probably spend a couple, I would guess, 2 meetings at least, just focusing on that criteria for reprioritization and kind of discussing what everyone's ideal is. And then I think that's going to kind of steer how we keep moving along our benchmarks that we said we wanted to hit to keep this thing moving. So real quick, any feedback you have from me? I know as a new chair, I'm probably like all over the place because my mind works like that sometimes. But any feedback from me on what would help these meetings be more efficient, more effective as we go forward?
So one of the areas that I think that we really need to have a conversation about and I'm happy to do the criteria reprioritization and work on the King for a Day plan. I think that's a good idea to kind of compare notes based on what we have now. But one of the thoughts that just keeps reverberating through my head is there are going to be things that, the plan, the 55,000 square foot plan, the reason why we came up with 55,000 square feet was because we had 55,000 square feet, right? And if we start thinking about what can fit in the Ritter, what can potentially go into town hall, if we were to redo a section of TC Passios or build a new municipal office building with 25,000 square feet, just throwing a number out there, what would fit in there? Once you do all that, there's going to be stuff that isn't going to fit. And I think that we talked about some of those today with the school department, extended day, potentially school link services, those kinds of things. But one of the areas that I think is going to be a square peg in a round hole, but I also think is incredibly important to our overall function in town government is PAC. And I think PAC is going to deserve its own discussion because of the specific needs that they have that you can't just stick in a room with 9-foot ceilings. And also because of the reality of what they do in terms of the networking that they need to connect to in town hall and school and that kind of thing. And in my mind, the PAC discussion that you all had within the confines of the TC Passios footprint is probably no longer relevant. And we need to have a PAC discussion that potentially sits outside of that footprint if we're going to have an informed discussion about where stuff can go and what is going to require investment.
Okay. Any other feedback, comments? All right. So always a pleasure seeing you guys. Our next meeting is coming up on the 6th of June. As always, we try to target a 90-minute meeting, but certainly, if they run over, they run over. But that's always the target here. All right, next meeting on June the 6th. Then we have a meeting on July the 20th because our first meeting in July would otherwise fall on the 4th observed holiday. July is looking like we'll have one meeting on the 18th of July, which I'm a big fan of slowing down during the summer so that way we can take breaks. All right, let's go to the public comments here. Any public comments from the public this evening? Seeing none. Any public comments from Tony with APDC?
No, no comments.
All right, any public comments from the board? None. All right.
Sorry, I just wanted to check you had said the dates. Was it, you said July 20th? I think it's June 20th.
Correct. The next one would be June 6th, then June 20th, then July 18th.
Are we allowed to have a meeting on the 20th? Is that a holiday? Because June 19th is a Sunday.
Oh.
So like I know my work's recognizing
Juneteenth
it
is a
on.
federal holiday.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, you are
So no.
correct. No, we cannot meet. See, the new holiday, and I'm the one messing this one up.
I was just looking at my calendar and I was like, oh yeah, it's no work on that day.
No,
So I'm assuming
Juneteenth, it's a state holiday too. So Massachusetts passed it as well. And that was part of the discussion at town meeting because the town has not adopted, well, we haven't adopted any holidays, but we haven't adopted it as a town kind of wide holiday. And so there's kind of a hodgepodge of how we're treating it with our unions. So I think town meeting discussion was to try to bring them all into one umbrella. Anyway, yes, it will be an observed holiday. And so June, we can talk at our June 6th meeting about scheduling a second meeting in June, depending on where we're at in our conversation, or we're just planning to meet in July. So I think, we are gearing up towards a financial ask here, coming, I'm sure for the fall or for next spring, probably the fall. So, all right, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second that.
All right, and we'll do a roll call vote. Christina,
Hi.
Brian,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Tony, and an aye for myself. All right, thank you all, and have a good evening.
Aye.
Good night. Thank you.